I stand in our dining room, adjusting the crystal glasses one last time. 40 years of marriage deserves the good china, the silver candlesticks my mother gave us, and the bottle of Cabernet we've been saving since our 35th. The candlelight catches my wedding ring as I smooth the tablecloth, a small circle of gold that's witnessed 4 decades of a life built together. Perfect, I whisper to myself, touching the locket around my neck. Inside, Robert and I on our wedding day, me in my mother's restored lace gown. Him with that infectious smile and a full head of dark hair. Now at 68, my hair has silvered gracefully. Is too what remains of it. I smooth my crimson dress, the one he said brings out the spark in my eyes, and check my watch. Robert's rarely late. Punctuality, he always says, is respect made visible. One of his many corporate mantras that somehow became our family philosophy over the years. The photos lining our walls tell our story better than I ever could. Our starter home with the leaky roof. Robert's first corner office at Midwest Financial. The kids' graduations, and finally the crown jewel. Our retirement dream home in Naples. 3 years ago we stood on that lanai overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, and Robert squeezed my hand. "We made it, Lynn," he'd said. "This is our reward." The front door opens. Robert enters, still handsome at 70 in his tailored suit, though something in his posture seems off. Distant. I've cataloged his expressions for 40 years, this one doesn't register in my mental archive. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," I say, reaching for the wine. "I've recreated our dinner from Salvatore's. Remember that little place in Napa where you proposed all over again on our 25th? Robert doesn't look at the table I've spent hours preparing. Instead, he places his briefcase down deliberately, like he's measuring each movement. "Linda, I sold the Florida house." The wine bottle hovers mid-pour. My hand doesn't shake strange when everything inside me is trembling. I carefully set the bottle down, my father's voice echoing in my mind. When confronted with the unexpected, gather information before revealing your position. "Our retirement home?" I keep my voice steady. "The one we spent 3 years searching for? Why would you make that decision without me?" Robert checks his phone, a new habit I've noticed lately. "It's done. I found something better." There it is, a subtle shift in his expression when the screen lights up. In 4 decades of marriage, I've learned to read the micro-expressions, the tells that even Robert doesn't realize he has. "Better than what we chose together?" I ask, watching his eyes for that flicker of something. "Better than our sunset views and the community we've already joined?" Things evolve, Linda. We need to adapt. His phone buzzes again. He glances down, and I don't miss the small smile that forms before he quickly pockets the device. "I have a conference call," he says, already turning away. "We'll discuss the details tomorrow." As the door to his study closes, I remain perfectly still, cataloging each new piece of information. After 40 years of partnership, I'm suddenly facing an adversary rather than a husband. But I've never been one to crumble in a crisis. Instead, I strategize. The bedroom feels too large tonight, too empty. Robert sleeps soundly beside me, or pretends to. His breathing doesn't have the rhythmic quality I've fallen asleep to for 40 years. I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, mentally reviewing the evidence. 3 middle-of-the-night phone calls in the past month. Passwords changed on our joint accounts. The sudden business dinners that never appeared on the shared calendar we've maintained since the kids were in elementary school. And now the house sale, our dream, liquidated without consultation. "Who are you?" I whisper, looking at his back, the curve of his shoulder unfamiliar somehow. I slip from bed and pad to his study. The door creaks slightly. Robert always meant to oil that hinge. Ironic how the maintenance tasks he perpetually postponed now work in my favor. His desk is meticulously organized, tax files in the right drawer, property documents in the left. I've respected these boundaries for decades, believing marriage meant trust without verification. How naive that seems now. The computer asks for a password I no longer know. But Robert's phone lies charging on the desk unlocked. A rookie mistake for a man so suddenly secretive. I scroll through his messages, my heart beating steadily despite everything. There it is, a thread with someone named Clara. Thanks for selling the house, babe. Can't wait to see our new place. My stomach doesn't drop. My world doesn't shatter. Instead, a strange calm settles over me as pieces click into place. The late nights, the changed passwords, the emotional withdrawal. Classic symptoms I've seen in so many of my friends' marriages, symptoms I never imagined would infect mine. I take photos of the messages with my own phone. Document everything as Dad taught me. I check his recent calls, Clara Bennett, multiple times daily. I photograph this too. In his desk drawer, I find the sale documents for our Naples home. The signature line shows only Robert's name, a legal impossibility for our jointly owned property. Another photo from my growing file. Oh, Robert, I whisper. You've made a critical error. As I carefully return everything to its exact position, muscle memory from years of administrative work proves valuable. Leave no trace. Gather information. Plan carefully. Back in bed, I lie still as stone, but my mind races with strategic clarity. Tomorrow, I'll call my college roommate Diane, now the most sought-after divorce attorney in Cincinnati. Then I'll visit the bank to review our accounts. Knowledge is power, and Robert has significantly underestimated just how powerful I can be. Rain pelts the windows of Thompson Associates law firm as I sit across from Philip Thompson, Robert's attorney for 25 years. The leather chair feels cold beneath me. Nothing like the warm, sand-colored furniture in our Florida dream home. Tea, Mrs. Reynolds? Thompson asks, his bow tie slightly askew. He's always been kind to me at the firm's Christmas parties, complimenting my pecan pie, asking about the grandkids. Linda, please, I say, accepting the cup. I think we're beyond formalities now. Thompson shuffles papers, uncomfortable. Outside, thunder punctuates the silence. I've known Robert since law school. He begins, adjusting his glasses. This is unusual. Selling our jointly owned property without my signature or knowledge. I'd call that more than unusual, Philip. I'd call it illegal. He sighs, removes his glasses, polishes them on his monogrammed handkerchief. It's actually worse than that. As rain drums against the window, Thompson slides a document across his mahogany desk. Robert's updated will, dated just 3 weeks ago. He's leaving everything to someone named Clara Bennett, Thompson says, his voice carrying a weight of professional disappointment. She's 30 years his junior, a colleague at Midwest Financial. I take a sip of tea, surprised by my steady hand. The Clara from the text messages. The beneficiary of our 40 years of careful financial planning and shared sacrifice. I see, I say, scanning the document with practiced precision. 2 decades as Robert's unofficial assistant taught me to read legalese fluently. And you prepared this will? Thompson shifts uncomfortably. Robert insisted. I advised against it. Strongly. But you did it anyway. I'm his attorney, Linda. Bound by confidentiality and obligation. And now I'm wondering if my ethical obligations have shifted, Thompson says carefully, particularly regarding the house sale. The rain intensifies as Thompson explains. Robert falsified documents to sell our Naples property, using an outdated power of attorney from when I had surgery 5 years ago. The proceeds, $1.2 million, were transferred to an account I don't recognize. This crosses several legal boundaries, Thompson says, including fraud. I think of our first apartment with the leaky faucet. Robert in the delivery room when Jake was born, tears streaming down his face. The matching rocking chairs on our Florida lanai where we planned to watch sunsets into our 90s. How long? I ask, my voice calm despite the hurricane inside me. How long has Robert been with this Clara? Thompson looks at his hands. Based on what he shared, about 3 years. Since shortly before you purchased the Florida home. 3 years. The entire time we were house hunting for our dream retirement. Robert was building a different dream with someone else. I wish I'd come to you sooner, Thompson says. I fold the will carefully, Tuck it into my leather portfolio alongside the photos of text messages and bank statements I've been methodically collecting. No, I say, closing the portfolio with a decisive click. This is exactly the right time. The ruby anniversary decorations still hang in our living room, a sad testament to celebrations abandoned. I've left them deliberately, a silent reproach as Robert enters, loosening his tie after another late meeting. We need to talk, I say, gesturing to the documents spread across our coffee table. The will, the fraudulent house sale papers, bank statements showing the missing $1.2 million. Robert freezes, eyes darting from the papers to my face. For a moment, I glimpse panic before his features harden into something unfamiliar. You've been snooping through my things? He asks, attempting righteous indignation. Interesting that's your concern, I reply, tapping the falsified documents. Not the fraud you've committed. Not the betrayal of 40 years together. He tosses his jacket aside, pours himself 2 fingers of the Macallan scotch we bought together in Edinburgh on our 35th anniversary trip. The trip where he'd held my hand walking through the Highlands and promised, "The best is still ahead of us, Lynn." Who's Clara Bennett? I ask, watching him over the rim of my reading glasses. The glass pauses halfway to his lips. A colleague. A colleague who's now the sole beneficiary of your will? A colleague you're buying property with using the proceeds from our retirement home. A flash of something shame crosses his face before it's replaced by cold determination. You wouldn't understand. Things change, Linda. People change. Apparently they do, I say, pulling out the text messages I've printed. I particularly enjoyed this exchange. Can't wait to make our dreams real. Elle will never know what hit her. Very poetic, Robert. His face flushes. You had no right. No right. My voice rises for the first time. I had every right. I'm still your wife. That home was in both our names. Those accounts hold our shared retirement funds. 40 years, Robert. For decades of building a life. And you discard me like yesterday's newspaper. He stares into his scotch, suddenly looking old. It's not that simple. It never is, I say. But do enlighten me. Clara understands me in ways you never have, he says, the words rehearsed sounding. She sees the future the way I do. The future that includes my retirement funds? He slams the glass down. You've been comfortable enough all these years. You'll survive. The word survive ignites something in me, a fury I've never known, white-hot and clarifying. I've never just survived, Robert. I've built. I've contributed. I raised our children while maintaining our home and supporting your career. I coordinated our finances, planned our future, our supposed future. I was your partner, not your dependent. He turns away. It's too late. Decisions have been made. I gather the documents deliberately, sliding them back into my portfolio with the measured precision I've always applied to tasks that matter. You're right about one thing, I say, rising from the couch we chose together 15 years ago. Decisions have been made. Just not by you alone anymore. Robert's face changes as realization dawns. What have you done? I've frozen our joint accounts, I say calmly. I've filed an injunction against the house sale. And tomorrow, I'm meeting with my attorney to discuss charges of financial fraud. His face pales. You wouldn't. I move toward the door, portfolio tucked firmly under my arm. I already have. You see, Robert, you taught me something valuable over 40 years together. Always protect your assets. The corner booth at Maggie's Diner has been my thinking spot for 30 years. I spread my notes beside a mug of coffee that Doris keeps refilling without asking. She's worked here since her divorce 15 years ago, another woman who rebuilt after betrayal. Across from me sits Mark Sullivan, the private investigator Thompson recommended. His weathered face suggests he's seen every variation of marital deception. Clara Bennett, 38, he says, sliding photos across the table. Financial analyst at Midwest for 5 years. Previously worked at 3 firms, never longer than 2 years. Divorce once left her husband for her boss at Goldman Sachs. I study the woman who's replacing me: sleek chestnut hair, designer clothes, confident smile. Young, beautiful. Everything I was when Robert and I met at Ohio State before life and gravity took their toll. Their relationship timeline? I ask, keeping my voice professional. Mark consults his notes. Based on digital records and witness statements, approximately 3 years. Beginning shortly after she joined his department. 3 years. The exact period we'd been planning our retirement, house hunting in Naples, discussing how we'd spend our golden years together. Financial connections? Substantial, Mark says, showing me bank records. Robert has funded her MBA, paid off her student loans, purchased a luxury vehicle in her name. Approximately $420,000 over 3 years, not including gifts or travel. I note each detail, adding it to my growing arsenal. 40 years in administration taught me the power of thorough documentation. My phone rings. Thompson's office. Linda, he says, his voice animated in a way I've never heard from the usually staid attorney. The judge granted our emergency injunction. The house sale is frozen pending investigation. And the accounts? Frozen as well. Robert can't access or transfer any jointly held assets. I exhale slowly, feeling the first piece click into place. His reaction? Volcanic, Thompson says with professional satisfaction. He tried to withdraw funds this morning for a down payment on a property in Vail. The bank denied the transaction. Vail, I repeat. Robert hates skiing, or always claimed to when I suggested winter vacations in Colorado. There's more, Thompson adds. I've been examining your original estate documents. There's something from 2003 that Robert may have forgotten about: a separate trust established in your name. We need to discuss this in person. As I end the call, Mark studies me with newfound respect. Most clients I work with fall apart when they learn about affairs. You're different. I stir my coffee thoughtfully. When you've spent 40 years managing a household, raising children, and supporting a husband's career, you develop certain skills: organization, strategic thinking, patience. I close my portfolio with a decisive snap. And I've always been an excellent chess player. The trendy downtown cafe is Clara's suggestion: all exposed brick, industrial lighting, and 20-something baristas with elaborate tattoos. I arrive early, securing a corner table where my back won't be to the door. Another lesson from 4 decades of attending Robert's corporate functions: always position yourself to observe the room. She enters confidently, scanning faces until she spots me. Recognition flickers. She's seen my photo, studied me as I've studied her. Her handshake is firm, her smile practiced. Mrs. Reynolds, she says, sliding into the chair across from me. Thank you for meeting me. Linda, please, I reply, noting her Cartier watch similar to the one Robert gave me for our 30th anniversary. I appreciated your call. This meeting was her idea, a surprise move that intrigued me enough to accept despite Thompson's concerns. This is awkward, Clara begins, stirring her oat milk latte. But I thought we should talk woman to woman. I smile politely. About. Robert and I are building a life together, she says, leaning forward. I know this must be difficult after 40 years, but sometimes relationships run their course. I sip my Earl Grey, observing her micro-expressions. Beneath the confidence, something more calculated lurks. And you felt the need to tell me this personally because? Because I respect what you and Robert had, she says with practiced sincerity. And because fighting the inevitable will only make this harder for everyone. The inevitable, I repeat. Robert's moved on, she says, her hand drifting to her abdomen in a gesture that stops my breath. We're starting a family. The judge will unfreeze the assets eventually. Why drag this out? The pregnancy revelation, her trump card, lands with calculated precision. I keep my expression neutral while my mind races. Is it true? A manipulation tactic? Either way, it's information I can use. Congratulations, I say mildly. How convenient that Robert's retirement funds became available, just as you're expanding your family. Her smile hardened slightly. He chose me, Linda. He wants a fresh start. With my retirement savings. Clara sighs dramatically. You signed off on the house sale. You agreed Robert could manage the proceeds. Now we reach the heart of it, the falsified documents, the signatures she believes are legitimate. I simply nod, letting her continue digging her hole. Robert says you've always been reasonable, she continues. That you'd understand it's time to move on gracefully. We're offering a fair settlement. I gather my things unhurriedly. Life rarely gives us what we expect, Clara. I've found it's not the unexpected challenges that define us, but how strategically we respond to them. Her confidence wavers slightly. What does that mean? I stand straightening my blazer. It means you'll be hearing from my attorney. Oh, and Clara? Robert has a tell when he lies a small tick near his left eye. You might want to watch for it when he discusses your future together. As I leave, I text Thompson. Proceed with the forensic accounting. Clara confirms the document fraud, though she doesn't realize it. And check Robert's medical records from his physical last year. We may have an additional complexity. The courtroom feels smaller than I expected, more intimate. Our private drama now plays out before the judge, court reporter, and handful of observers. Robert sits with his attorney, occasionally glancing at Clara in the first row. He hasn't looked at me once. Judge Harriet Wilson, a contemporary of mine who broke barriers as one of the first female judges in our district, reviews documents with reading glasses perched on her nose. I recognize the gesture from our PTA days, when she scrutinized budget proposals with the same intensity. In the matter of Reynolds versus Reynolds, she begins, we're addressing multiple claims: financial fraud, unauthorized sale of jointly owned property, and improper transfer of assets. Robert's attorney presents first, painting me as the unreasonable wife unable to accept change. Mrs. Reynolds agreed to the house sale, he claims, presenting the documents with my supposed signature. She simply changed her mind and now seeks to penalize Mr. Reynolds for moving forward with agreed-upon plans. Thompson rises when our turn comes, his bow tie perfectly straight today. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Reynolds' signatures were falsified. The forensic document examiner's report is included in our filing. The room shifts as Thompson methodically dismantles Robert's case. The falsified power of attorney, the fraudulent house sale, the systematic transfer of joint assets to accounts bearing only Robert's and Clara's names. Robert's face hardens with each revelation. When Thompson presents the evidence of Clara's previous pattern of workplace relationships with senior executives, she visibly flinches. Furthermore, Thompson continues, Mrs. Reynolds never consented to these transactions. She was systematically misled about their joint financial status, while Mr. Reynolds diverted retirement funds to establish a new life with Ms. Bennett. Judge Wilson removes her glasses. Mr. Reynolds, these are serious allegations supported by substantial evidence. Do you wish to respond? Robert stands, straightening his tie, a gesture I've seen before countless business presentations. Your Honor, while there may have been some irregularities in the documentation, Linda and I had discussed downsizing from the Naples property. The proceeds were intended for our mutual benefit. By mutual benefit, the judge asks, do you mean the condominium in Vale purchased jointly with Ms. Bennett? Or perhaps the $42,000 in student loan debt of Ms. Bennett's that you paid from joint funds? Robert pales slightly. There are explanations. I'm sure there are, Judge Wilson interrupts. However, the evidence of financial impropriety is overwhelming. The injunction will remain in place while criminal charges are considered. I maintain my composure, feeling neither victory nor vindication, only a hollow acknowledgement of justice in progress. Then Thompson plays his final card. Your Honor, there's one additional matter, he says, presenting a document I haven't seen before. In 2003, Mr. Reynolds established an irrevocable trust for Mrs. Reynolds that he appears to have forgotten. This trust, funded with his year-end bonuses for 10 consecutive years, has appreciated to approximately $3.2 million. The courtroom falls silent. Robert's jaw literally drops. "That's impossible," he sputters. "That trust was theoretical for tax planning. It was never funded." Thompson slides another document forward. "The banking records indicate otherwise, Your Honor. Mr. Reynolds made annual contributions, as documented here. The trust terms are quite clear. The assets are solely Mrs. Reynolds, regardless of marital status." As the implications sink in, Robert's face transforms from shock to defeat. Clara slips out of the courtroom, her exit barely noticed in the unfolding drama. Judge Wilson reviews the trust documents, nodding. The trust appears legitimate and properly executed. "Mrs. Reynolds, were you aware of this arrangement?" "No, Your Honor," I answer truthfully. "This is as surprising to me as it appears to be to my husband." "Then perhaps," the judge says with the faintest hint of a smile, "this is one instance where forgetfulness has served the cause of justice." 6 months later, I stand on the lanai of my Naples home, my home now, in name and spirit. The Gulf stretches before me, painted in sunset oranges and pinks that Florida does better than anywhere else. A glass of Pinot Grigio rests on the side table beside the latest book club selection. My phone buzzes with a text from Robert. "The medical bills arrived. Can we discuss my portion? I'm sorry, Linda, for everything." I don't respond immediately. After the court revelations, learning about Jake's rare autoimmune condition had thrown everything into a new light. Robert's desperate, misguided attempt to secure specialized treatment using Clara and her pharmaceutical connections to access experimental protocols didn't excuse his betrayal, but added complexity to a narrative I'd thought clear-cut. Clara disappeared once the truth emerged and the assets were frozen. Robert's health deteriorated rapidly following the stress of the proceedings, revealing vulnerabilities I hadn't recognized beneath his corporate armor. I take a sip of wine and text back. "Treatment costs are covered through the trust. Focus on your recovery. Jake needs his father." Some might consider it weakness, this compassion after betrayal. I see it differently. Strength isn't measured by how completely you can destroy an adversary, but by how firmly you can stand in your own power while making clear-eyed choices. The doorbell rings, my book club arriving for our monthly discussion. These women, most facing their own life transitions, have become my unexpected community. Diane, my attorney friend. Maggie, recently widowed after 50 years of marriage. Sarah, rebuilding after her husband's gambling addiction destroyed their savings. We gather on the lanai, wine glasses clinking as the sun makes its final descent. The conversation flows from literature to life, laughter punctuating stories of challenge and renewal. "To Linda," Diane toasts, raising her glass, "who showed us all that the third act might be the best one yet." As darkness settles over the Gulf, I think about the journey of the past year. The betrayal that could have ended me instead revealed strengths I'd forgotten I possessed. The skills I developed supporting Robert's career now serve my independent life beautifully. The trust he established, perhaps from guilt, perhaps from genuine care, provides security he never anticipated I'd need so soon. Life offers no guarantees, not in 40 years of marriage, not in carefully laid retirement plans. What it does offer is the constant opportunity for reinvention, the chance to author new chapters when the previous narrative falters. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, life offers something even more valuable: the discovery that you were always stronger than you knew.